Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Before we get started, since we now know that there has been a live event in EVE Online, I do think that it's maybe useful that I also share some of like the news items that deal with these types of live events or potentially deal with these types of live events. So there's two new items after the disruption of the time measuring experiment, and the first one is called SOE Splinter Groups Claim Time-Based Mission, a cover for Concord Black Ops Anti-Drifter Experiment. So I read the article and basically I would say that it deals with potentially two things. Number one is that a Splinter Group, a part of the Sisters of Eve, is claiming that a Concord faction, basically a part of Concord, was setting up this experiment so that they could entice drifters to come in and then test some of their experimental weapons on them. So very interesting stuff. The second part of the article basically deals with the end of the Rogue Swarm event, where Concord says that sure, this Rogue Swarm incursion, you could say, was unusually long, but they're looking into more methods to contain the Rogue Swarm. So I do think that we still have to make a difference between the live event itself, which might be tied to the drifters, if we believe this article, and then the rogue drones themselves, or maybe at some point there will become, of course, a link between the rogue drones and the drifters themselves, who knows, but I'm still considering both of them different factions. The second story, Concord deploys assault commandos and sanctions in the aftermath of attack on Science mission. This here talks about how Concord boards a player vessel with commandos to steal back the corpse of, what was he called? The Astromancer, I believe. Yeah, the Astromancer. So we do know that after the science ship was attacked, 3 attacking ships were destroyed as well. And Concord asked for the Capsuleers to return anything that might be of interest to them. And so I think that here this is going to be a bit of an in-lore explanation as to why the corpse might be taken away from the player, and some other items as well. Because I think another pilot, let's see if he's actually named. In the meantime, Captain Ovek Drust of the DD's Genesis fleet has engaged in an attempt to recover what he describes as material evidence from the Capsuleer and noted Sanisebic philosopher Valerie Valade. And so I think Valerie Valade is a player that may have scooped up some interesting loot from the Astromaster ship. So we'll see how that works out, but of course I will also be keeping a closer eye on these in-game news items, so that hopefully I can find out when the new live events are coming and try to join them, of course. That's the goal behind all of this. Next up, we are here for the market, of course, so let's get started on that. Here we go, pressing a market. As always, we are going to start with plex and stuff at 325. Let's go. So plex, I don't think I've moved much. If you look at the percentage in the ticker, it's really not much. If we look on the chart as well, it's basically a flat line on the 5-day moving average, and the daily moving average staying below 3.25 million per plex. If we put on the filters or put off the filters so that we can also see what's happening in the player-owned trade hubs, we can see that the I Choose You trade hub is still doing quite well. There they cost 3,250,000 ISK. Buyers are coming in at 3,174,000, so very narrow margin. And then in the station it's 3,320,000, a little bit more expensive as always. You're paying more taxes there, but not by a lot. I think this is basically just as much as people can squeeze out of the difference between perimeter and Jita, just really the absolute minimum. So very interesting, very narrow margins here, and basically a flat plex price at the moment. Where will it go? That's what's going to be interesting. Historically speaking, we would have had like an expansion in December. We would have had this peak, this run up towards December, which you could still see maybe from like 3 million to close to 3.25, even 3.5 million, and then a descent which, if history has been might be something that predicts what happens here, we would see a decline towards May as a bottom. That's something that's happened quite regularly, but keep in mind that those are the things that have happened when we had a major winter expansion, and that hasn't exactly been the case here. And if we look forward to what's coming next, we know that, well, there will be FanFest, and CCP has yet to announce anything for their 2018 plans, really, outside of the outposts being replaced by faction citadels, I think, and a rebalancing of the heavy assault cruisers, heavy assault frigates. So that's something that we'll look at next week as an extra product as well. And so other than that, we really don't know which way CCP is going to go with EVE Online. It's going to be more working on the back end to prepare for some bigger changes, or are we going to get some bombshell announcements in the upcoming weeks and months? Both of these could definitely drive Plex in different directions. So still a wait and see approach from me personally. Next up, we'll take a look at the multiple pilot training certificates, see if anything is happening there. What is pretty obvious is that in the last few months, we have basically been going down in volatility again and settling at just a little bit above 1.3 billion ISK for training certificates. 1,350,000,000 pretty much for the sellers, 1,281,000,000 for the buyers, a little bit less than 1.3 billion on the buyer side of things. Still, I think compared to Plex, a much cheaper option if you just want an extra toon to be trading. So that's Plex and multiple training certificates. Next up, we've got the skill extractor, because that of course always follows Plex very closely. Up a little bit in price here at the tail end actually, but also down a little bit in price where Plex has been flat. So I wouldn't fret that all too much. 364 million for the sellers, 360 million for the buyers. Again, that very narrow margin, and at 364 for the sellers in player-owned trade hubs, 374.5 when it comes to players in Jita itself. So I would almost say a wider margin here between the sellers in the trade hubs and in Jita itself when it comes to the skill extractors, which I think is because it actually dropped off a little bit and now basically came back to the 1st of January price. So flat over the month so far, but with a little upswing here causing a little bit of an increased margin between Jita 4.4 and the player trade hubs. Next up, the skill injectors. So the large skill injectors to me are very interesting, potentially as investments, but we are talking a 1-year high point here again, well above 800 million, an increase in price, which is an indication that there's an increased demand for skill points as well. Where would this come from? Potentially alpha players, of course. 818 million for the sellers, 794 for the buyers, and Jita sellers 836. 818 to 836, yeah, a little bit larger margin, in not so much in percentage, I don't think, compared to the skill extractors, so pretty natural here as well. Nothing all too strange, but the real question I would say is, where is the extra demand coming for the large skill injectors? I can see 3 possible sources. Number 1, alpha clones, because if you do want to get into a battleship and things like that as an alpha clone, you'll want skill points, and at some point you'll earn 800 million, and then you might want to invest that in a large scale injector, but I don't think that that's actually all too strong when they still have the option for the daily alpha injector for a while, the small scale injectors as well. So I would say that potentially we're talking about nullsec players that are preparing for whatever it is they want to do. If you need more Rorcal pilots, you know, you'll want some skill injectors for that. If you need more carrier pilots, fax pilots, things like that, you know, skill points might be in demand there as a preparation. Hopefully this is a sign that there's basically like a Cold War happening in nullsec, where people are arming up, preparing for a clash at some point, because at the moment I would say that the general vibe from nullsec is that that is very quiet there, that most people are, for instance, mining without interruption, ratting without really any interruption, except for the bots who still needed to be changed to the changes to local, apparently, to the chat windows. But other than that, there's still skirmishes happening. Of course, it's not like it's a complete blue donut and complete peace, but there's definitely no major war happening right now that is like making the front page and things like that. People are preparing for that. What might be the trigger is the Structures 2.0 deployment from CCP, where normally they'll make it easier to actually attack these structures, especially those that aren't fueled anymore. They should lose an entire timer, bring that down from 3 to 2, making it definitely a lot easier to actually start doing structure damage and to maybe even counter the structures that are being deployed offensively as well, because you're getting 2 vulnerability timers there as well normally. One right as you deploy it, and then one when it comes out of the deployment first after 24 hours. And I think the first one is something new that might actually mean that if you patrol your space effectively, you can make it harder for an offensive deployment to be all, you know, which is something that happens all too easily right now. People just drop an Astros in a system that you own, and then can start building up from there. So it's gonna be interesting, and I'm reading that as a sign that there might be big preparations in Nullsec happening. Another possible and actually maybe even likely source of interest for the large scale injectors, I would say, would be investors, because me personally, I would like if I would make investments that would protect against inflation and still have a chance to have like a speculative increase in price as well, on increased skill point amount, on a good patch from CCP or something like that, it would be the large scale injectors. Of course, I personally am pretty hesitant to jump in at the current price, because as you can see here, we are pretty much at a 1-year high price. And then we finally also have the small skill injectors, which are going up in price a little bit as well. So there is demand for skill points, 165.5 for the sellers, 155 for the buyers. So another sign that there is demand for skill points. And then the daily alpha injectors actually still settling down here, selling for 58 million, buyers at 52.6 million. Yeah, down a little bit in price, normally 60 million. That's actually under pressure a bit. Very interesting. Where is the demand coming from? Maybe not so much from the alpha players at this point. Next up, we're moving on to some minerals at 1210. There we go. Tritanium, you may already have seen the good news on the ticker there, up in price again, a second leg up. So we were hesitating in the last week or so to go higher. From what would this point be, maybe 4.7, something like that. But look at the sellers, especially in station, 499, 5 ISK. It's 1.6 billion units, it's 1 billion units. People are taking advantage of the 5 ISK coming back to dump some of their stocks, but 5 ISK is back, which is not bad. If you can mine for titanium at 5 ISK, it's not great, but it's definitely something that you can consider to bring to the market right away. So interesting. And I would put this again as another sign that there is strong demand, so a strong build-up in Nullsec as well, preparing for whatever is to come next. And well, if you know what's on the horizon, there is Structures 2.0, and then there is the faction Citadels, both of which should at least entice some sort of conflict in Nullsec, in my opinion. Next up, we've got Pyrite. That is still not doing well at all, still hovering just above 4.5 ISK on the chart, 455 for the sellers, 440 for the buyers, and still a billion, yeah, that's a billion units, and almost a billion units coming in here. Pretty crazy. People are still dumping that pyrite at prices that are, well, extremely low. 1-year lows, historic lows, way cheaper than titanium as well at this point. 5 ISK for titanium, 455 for titanium. That's a crazy situation, but it's been going on for so long that, well, if you've been buying piecemeal here, you know, small batch here at close to 4.5, small batch here at close to 4.5, I think that could still be a good deal, but I would definitely understand if you don't do that anymore. Because it's just being crazy bad for pyrite. A war would definitely change that though. Next up, we've got Mixalon, and that one is going up again towards 75 on the chart. Very nice. 74.34 for the sellers, 70.08 for the buyers. Buyers going up above 70 ISK. I think last week was sellers that were above 70 ISK. So very good news again. Titanium, Mixalon, definitely your focus if you're mining in high sec. As we're heading back to that 75, which is, as you can see, an above average price for the year, and definitely even historically a good price for Mixalon. And we know that Mixalon has been and probably still is the bottleneck for production, for industry in in 0.0 when they're trying to mine for themselves. And so here again, a strong indication of lots of preparations, lots of production happening in nullsec that is having its impact here. Tritanium, you know, it's also, tritanium is very bulky, and so it's probably not always very efficient to be mining for tritanium. And so what you sometimes want to do is maybe mine for some other minerals like zydrine or megasite, and use those funds to grab lots of tritanium, grab lots of compressed feldspar, for instance, from HiSec, and then move that back so that you don't have to mine and refine all of that raw feldspar yourself, which just means lots of cargo space wasted that could have been used for zydrine sources, megasite sources, morphite sources, things like that. I think that's maybe the reason why tritanium is actually showing up some strength here at the moment. Then after megasite, which is also showing strength, we've got Mexalon, we've got Isogen still down the drain, so that one obviously is not doing well. We even have a data point here at 39 ISK daily average price. Let's see if the sellers are still above 40. Just 40.8 ISK for the sellers, 39.13 for the buyers, and they're slowly starting to drag Isogen below 40 ISK. Look out below if we actually ever get the sellers that low. That's going to be very, very bad news for Isogen. I think that because this has been, as you can see in the last 2 months or so, a psychological barrier where the market has said, you know what, below 40, I'm gonna start purchasing that. But how long are you going to keep doing that? If that keeps being tested again and again, I don't know. It's the same with pyrite here that keeps testing the 4.5 ISK mark. If at some point that gets broken, well, we might be looking at a 35 to 40 ISK price band for a while for Isogen. And then of course your investments here, which again I'm saying don't go crazy with the volumes, will have been a bit of a mistake. You'll need even more patience and even more investments to try and cut down on your averages in order to then make a profit when it finally does go back up. And then we've got Noxium. Up a little bit in price, back above 325. It's definitely hovering between the 300 and 350 price mark at the moment. 329 for the sellers, 314 for the buyers. It's also definitely still at the low end here, but constantly bouncing off with decent volatility off of the 300 ISK mark. So here I would say, if you can purchase it close to 300 ISK or even less than that at some point on the buy orders, those are probably good investments. If you look at the entire chart here, there's enough demand for Noxium during the upswings here that if something were to happen to minerals in general to up them in price, we'll probably see Noxium go up decently violently. You can see that it has that sharp potential compared to some of the other minerals that aren't doing that hot. Next up for nullsec, we've got Zydrine, and you can see that one is continuing the slide, giving some credence to my theory. 799, sorry, for the sellers, but going below 800 ISK, look out for that. Again, the millions keep rolling in here. Buyers are going down to 743. They don't even want to pay 750 ISK for a Zydrine anymore, and this gives some credence to my theory that, well, nullsec is prioritizing whatever can make them the most ISK per cargo space, which is going to be Zydrine and megasite, but then there may be at some point liquidating some of that in order to actually purchase some of the compressed sources for tritanium and for Mexalon for their bottlenecks, creating this strange situation where nullsec is actually cutting in its own profits because of all of the supply that's coming in here. And Zydrine, 1 year low point, selling for less than 800 ISK. Very cheap stuff, especially if you have any interest in industry doing that from HiSec. I would highly recommend that you at least stock up on some of that while you can still get it this cheaply. Megasite is in the same situation, but we can see that it's trying to form a bottom, still well below 1000 ISK at this point. 973 for the sellers, 930 for the buyers. Still some margin there as well to go lower, and we can see here as well that we're playing with year low points here at this point. And then we've got Morphite. Let's take a look at that. I'd completely missed this move up here from around 8,000 ISK to less than 10,000 ISK, so still not a great price, but it's holding on at this point. 9,600 for the sellers, 9,061 for the buyers. A bit of volume increase as well. Basically, Morphite is doing okay At this point, I would say too early to sell. I actually would prefer to sell on a peak like that, but still a bit too high to buy as well. Definitely want to buy for less than 9,000 ISK at this point. Next up, we've got our PI. Let's take a look at that at 20 minutes. There we go. Going over these, I think by this point most of the trends we know, and we'll see most of those again. The question is, where will we go from now, of course. Broadcast nodes, basically back on its average. This is an advanced PI material. You need those in structures, and maybe a slight upswing at the tail end here, back to 225 million. Yeah, 225 for the sellers, 2.2 for the buyers. Narrow margin, slightly higher than average, but definitely back in the normal trade range here. Construction blocks, let's see what those are doing. Basically still meandering about around 11.5k, I would say, on the average prices here. Daily prices a bit above, bit below, starting to show a weird daily average pattern here. So I guess sometimes we get sellers, sometimes we get buyers that win out. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers, and we're right in the middle of that when it comes to the chart. So I would say, yeah, sometimes there's a big buyer coming in, and then of course sellers win out, get average price of around 12k. Sometimes it's the buyers that someone buys up a lot of, someone sells a lot of their construction blocks because they don't have the patience, and then it's the 11,000 price range daily average that wins out. And as a result, we're back basically on an average price 11.5k on average for construction blocks. I would say is right where we expect construction blocks to be on average. Where will it go from here? That's difficult to say, of course, which again I think is going to depend largely on what CCP actually announces next. Consumer electronics doing something different though, after going down to 11,000 ISK, pretty much back up substantially to 16,000. Well, I need to sneeze here. I'm gonna try and hold it. 15,800 for the sellers, 14,200 for the buyers. So above average. Consumer electronics showing some movement. Very interesting. Not sure where this is coming from, but you can definitely try to produce those and sell them at this point. You're getting a very nice price. Coolants, fuel related, still struggling, of course, at their 1-year low price point here. Not much to say. 8,350 for the sellers, still decent volumes coming in. 8,270 for the buyers, so the margin has closed. Buyers are coming in with the same volumes. We're basically finding the bottom price and the new trade range for fuel related PIs. Coolants, very low but flat. Enriched uranium, very low, back up a little bit after reaching a bottom price of 8,700 pretty much. 10,000 for the sellers, 9,200 for the buyers. Okay, up in price a little bit right here, but staying at the low trade range, obviously. Integrity response drones, pretty much the same story for all advanced PI materials that are needed in structures here. Back on the average, even overshot a little bit. Went as low as 2.2 million and is now heading back to 2.5 million, and sellers are at 2.5, buyers are at 2.4 million ISK. So here again we're back where we would expect integrity response drones to be. It's okay to buy them if you want to make a new structure here, and if you want to start investing, well, if you have the patience to put up a buy order, try to pick some up at the cheaper end here. I think you could be doing okay for the next structure to be released. Mechanical parts next, that is looking pretty low, of course, trying to get back to 10,000 ISK here, fuel related. So 10,000 for the sellers, 9,800 for the buyers. Again, narrow margin here, good supply still coming in, decent demand at this price range as well. Basically, this is the situation for the fuel related PI. Nuclear reactors next, up a little bit in price, still not as much as we would like to see if we want to trade in this, but the purchase options for less than 90,000 ISK have been forming here a couple of times. So let's say that you could have bought them for 90,000, sellers back up to 115,000, not bad, buyers up to 97,000 here. Nuclear reactors showing some of that volatility. Just like consumer electronics, there are still some of these markets that are alive, and nuclear reactors is a very interesting one. It is tied to structures at some point, you can see that from this massive spike here, but even then, before that, we still had some of those interesting lows at 75Ks, and then going up to 130, even 140,000 is back down to 75, back up again. This is really a very interesting one to keep an eye out for, and if you can buy them at the closer range, at the lower range, let's say less than 90,000 ISK, you're usually making a good deal that in the upcoming weeks usually pays off. So it's a very interesting specialized PI material, this one. Robotics is fuel related, but starting to go back up a little bit. That's very interesting. I thought that maybe 90,000 ISK would be the new trade range, but sellers are up to 95,000 ISK almost. Buyers though, less than 90,000 ISK, they still want those cheap robotics. Margin increasing, price increasing a little bit, so this might be a bottom that we should have purchased on and actually bought some robotics at these low prices as well. Self-harmonizing power cores, not much to say. This is obviously advanced structure related, back on its average, selling for 2.16 million, so a bit above 2.1. Buyers are at a bit above 2.2 million, just below 2.1, so just basically back on the regular price. Superconductors was definitely flattening out below 12,000 ISK, but here now showing a little bit of volatility, but still staying 11 to 12,000. Normal trade range. This is very reminiscent of the construction blocks. Superconductors, there we go. With sometimes maybe the buyers winning out a little bit for a longer time and then the sellers winning out for a bit of a longer time. But let's take a look here. 12,200 for the sellers, 11,500 for the buyers. Yeah, that's pretty much what you would expect with this chart. Not much to say. On the lower end of the average, but still on the average for superconductors. And here at the tail end, maybe right on it, I would say. The sculptures next, showing some pressure at the tail end. That is interesting, but I would say if buyers are below 8,000 ISK, that's where it becomes interesting, and they're still not. 9,000 for the sellers, 8,300 for the buyers. So I would say have more patience for the sculptures. This is structure related, but this easily gets oversupplied for a long period of time. You can see that here, and so wait for the real buy opportunities. And we can see on the chart that it's practically 7,500 ISK. Finally, we've got wetware mainframes. Again, advanced PI, not much to say. Maybe slightly higher than average, or slightly higher than where we would like to get it. But 2.4 million for the sellers and 2.35 million for the buyers is okay. A bit more expensive than the others compared to the averages before the peak, but still definitely back in line with normal prices. So that's PI. Here again, I think that the real question is going to be, what is CCP announcing? Are we announcing new structures coming maybe for late 2018 or something like that? That could really make some of these advanced PI materials and some of the related lower tier PI materials very good investments to start to make and to look into. Are they going to do something about the lower fuel consumption, or do they want just more structures to eventually fix that? Maybe 2.0. where unfueled structures have 2 timers, something like that, could be very interesting for, now that I think about it, keep that in mind as well. 2.0, I think the idea is that unfueled structures, so structures that don't have services running and fueled, will also lose the timer. That could mean more demand for fuel in nullsec. So that is something that might happen as well, although at the moment most of the structures are considered throwaways for less than $1 billion, and perhaps it won't. So, but this is something to keep in mind for the fuel related PI. Definitely. And then interestingly enough, some of these are still alive, right? Consumer electronics, that would have been a very good trade, buying at 11k, selling right now at almost 16k. Very good. And I like the nuclear reactors as well. I think there's potential there for increased volatility as well. Let's move on to Tech One chips then at 28.45. There we go. We'll just go over these very quickly, because I think that by now you know the trend. Unfortunately, lots of these battleships still have to absorb and get back in line after the arms race dip here. So here is the Apocalypse still trading very low after that dip. Here is the Caracal. This is going to be the mineral prices showing through here. Very popular ship, but still selling for less than 9 million ISK. Buyers are at 8.2 million, and this is of course the mineral slump here. The Catalyst is still doing well. This is quite interesting. Still selling for like 1.5 million ISK, 1.7 even for the sellers, 1.2 for the buyers. I would say you're still getting a pretty good margin. Again, lack of supply showing up here, increased volumes showing up here. It's a personal gamble. I don't have any actual concrete information on this, but I do think that the Imperium is planning a burn cheetah at this point. The Drake arms race obviously actually going back down to 40 million, really 42 for the sellers, 38.5 for the buyers, and I guess some people are selling to those buyers because we can see the daily average prices here taking another dive close to 40 million. The Ferox next, also very low. It's not even arms race related, but definitely well below the normal averages. 46 million for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers. These are the fuel, the mineral prices doing their thing on some of the larger Tech 1 ships here. Hurricane, actually up in price a little bit. That's interesting. Someone, well, not really on volumes, so it must just have been the lack of availability, a little bit of extra demand pushing the Hurricane back up to 46.5 million for the sellers, 40.6 million for the buyers, and 46.5. That's over here on the chart. Definitely a little bit of a drive back here all of a sudden in the Hurricane that was very cheap, and I'm not seeing the volume increase just yet. Megatron, arms race, poor Megatron, trying to get to 1.4 billion. Sellers are there, but buyers 126 million. Buyers 126 million. Sellers 143.5 million. Margin increasing. People aren't willing to just keep selling those Megatrons for nothing. But it still has a ways to go to get back to like 150, I would say, at the lower end of its average. The Oracle, again, mineral slump here, not much to say, selling for 68 million, buyers are at 61.5 million, normal margin there. The Raven slowly trying to recover as well, even doing better than the Megatron here. Sellers coming in at 150, buyers are at 132. The Raven apparently has been absorbed by the market slightly better than the Megatron and the Apocalypse as well, that is still doing quite badly. The Retriever next, flat below 20 million ISK, 20 for the sellers, 18 for the buyers. Yeah, that's just not really doing too well. Staying flat below its average price, I would say it's the mineral showing up here. The Tempest trying to recover as well from the arms race event, 150 million for the sellers, 129 for the buyers here. Trying to get back, but yeah, still has a little bit of work to do there. Next up we've got the Thrasher, again, gang ship, destroyer, well above its average here at the moment. 1.4 million for the sellers, 1 million for the buyers. You can see the volume spikes as well. The Tornado, it's one that I would also expect to go up if you want to do some effective ganking, but maybe they've just calculated that the most effective way is actually to go with the right number of destroyers rather than trying to get the Tornado fleets to fit the necessary damage. And of course, if you're talking burning anything that comes out, very quickly people learn to not undock with a freighter anymore, but they'll still try with some smaller ships, and as a result you might just be interested in just going all out on the destroyers and not with this battle cruiser. So the Tornado, 58 million for the sellers, 53 for the buyers. Of course, right before that happens, they might want some initial Tornado fleets in there, and so they might want to keep the price low and then all of a sudden jump it up. Yeah, let's see if that happens or not. The Tristan back up a little bit in price, quite interesting. Selling now for 550. Yeah, a big buyout, yeah, volume increase, that's definitely something that happened here. Someone purchased lots of Tristans for some reason. The Venture next, also still trading at a higher end here, selling for 270, buyers are at 210, so doing quite well. Maybe they're still being lost a little bit in resource wars or something like that when you try to take them in a tier 2, but volumes are definitely not doing great for that. And then we've got the Vexor that is still just like the Caracal, trading well below its average here, well below 10 million, 9.7 million for the sellers, 8.9 million for the buyer. Poor Vexor. That's the mineral prices showing up here. So the Tech 1 market, except for the destroyers, is of course reeling under the low mineral prices and the arms race event here. Next up, the Tech 2 ships. Let's take a look at that at 3430. There we go. And here, just like in the last couple of weeks, let's see if we're taking another leg down from 30 million on these frigates, which is what was happening. 30.5 million for the sellers, 28 million for the buyers. Really not a big change from last week. I'm still seeing decent supply here, up to 31 million, so 19 here, and look at all of these. So not bad, but definitely a hesitation point here for the market. So are we going to spike up, or are we going to continue another leg down here? That's what we're trying to figure out. The Cerberus next shooting back up a little bit. Very interesting. After reaching 230 million, actually shooting up. Sellers at 277. Buyers are still at 230 million. So this has definitely been an interesting move up where the buyers haven't followed suit just yet. I do still think that the cruisers are going to take a little bit more time than the frigates to show the actual pattern of the Tech 2 market after the moon mining changes. Here is the Claw, dipping below 30 million, but spiking back up. Above that, 35.7 for the sellers, 30.5 for the buyers. Buyers force back up as well. Very interesting here. A first sign that maybe 30 million is the new low for these frigates. Who knows? It's gonna be interesting. The Crow next, also shooting back up here after actually reaching 27.5 million pretty much. That's interesting, but the sellers are back to 33 million. Buyers are at 27 million. That's an in-between one. It's definitely up in price on the sellers, but the buyers are still trying to push this one down. So, and the Aries hesitation, strong volatility, and an in-between one. Interesting stuff. The Crusader though, continuing its slow descent here. 29 million up for the sellers, 25.5 million for the buyers, still 159 of them coming in here. That's a sign of one that might actually show another leg down and find 25 million as its range. The Heretic next here, showing a little bit of pressure at the tail end, but still trading very high. 74 million for the sellers, 62 million for the buyers. It's a destroyer. Let's hope that this one can finally show some pressure as well and drive through that 70 million mark at some point. The Hound shooting back up to 35 million. That is interesting, I would say. 33.6 now for the sellers, 29.8 for the buyers here. That is interesting, breaking through 30 million and then shooting back up to 35 million. That was definitely a small trade opportunity here. Very interesting. The Ishtar cruiser, of course, still basically flat for about a month now, at a very high price, of course. 268 million for the sellers, 251 for the buyers. People are willing to pay this price for an Ishtar. I don't blame them. It's a tremendous ship. The Manticore next, also again bouncing off of the 30 million mark here, came very close, 31 million, but now already selling back for 37 million, 30 million for the buyers. This is going to be interesting because this is another ship that is showing a different pattern from what I was personally expecting, that we might actually go another leg down here. What is the Nemesis doing? Broke through 30 million, but shoots back up close to 35 million, 33.4 for the sellers, 27.6 for the buyers though. Keep in mind that these increased in prices here are not followed by the buyers yet. So that is really the question, who is going to win out, right? The sellers would like to see those high prices stick for a while and maybe start volatility at the 30 million trade range, but the buyers of the Nemesis are saying, hell no. 27.5 million for the buyers here. We want those prices below 30 million and we want them there to stay. So it's really gonna be, this is really, I would say, the market fighting it out, trying to find out who is going to win, and eventually, of course, it is the actual potential of moon mining and then the greed of the sellers that is going to determine whether or not we are finding the new trade range around 30 million or if we're going to go another leg down as well. The Pontifex next here, staying very high despite the peak up to 130 million. I would say that 87.5 million is very expensive. 85.4 for the sellers, 75 million for the buyers. What is interesting, 16, 33, 10, 108 of them coming in here. That is going to put a little bit of pressure on the price as well. So we're still up in the air about which way we're going to go here. Purifier showing the pattern here again, breaking through 30 million at some point. Currently selling for 36.7 million. You know, if you bought those, was a slight opportunity here. Interesting as well. Buyers going up to 31.6 million. Feel like they feel forced to go up in price here if they want to purchase some of those purifiers. That is interesting and makes for actually some movements that are trade worthy at some point. Next up here we get the Raptor though. That one is a little bit flat and actually going down in price on some days to less than 30 million on average, 33 for the sellers, 27.7 for the buyers. Here again, any of that new supply, and it's still half a front page of new ones coming in the last 24 hours, slowly driving the price back down. Buyers 27.7 million. They say, hey, let's get this Raptor below 30 million, please. Next up here we get the Sabre, flattening at 70 million, still very expensive of course, but here again 57, 50, 34, 32, another pretty decent supply coming in here with buyers at 66 million. What is the Stiletto doing next? That one is actually doing what happened last week, and just like the Aries is hesitating at this point. Where do I need to go? Nobody really knows. 30.5 million for the sellers, 27.5 million for the buyers, pretty much. 59 of them still coming in here. This one is hesitating, where the pattern has showed up several times, especially in the Stealth Bomber, that we should back up 5 million. Not so bad, you know, a sixth of the price, something like that. You could probably make a trade on that in the right station, but some of the others are hesitating. What's the Stork doing? Showing some pressure as well here, but still, of course, 88 million for the sellers, very expensive, 80 million for the buyers. These Command Destroyers are very expensive. And then finally we get the Taranis that is actually staying below 30 million despite the volume increase here. Very interesting, 30 million for the sellers, a little bit below that, 26.4 for the sellers, and still some supply available. Interesting. The Taranis again also showing that hesitation. So the Tech 2 market is still up in the air. As the extra product of the Tech 3, we are going to check Advanced Moon Materials, which might give us a little bit of an indication as to what to expect. But this week, last week it was almost uniformly frigates dropping to 30 million, showing that pressure from supply. It seemed basically a no-brainer that we would continue to go down. But here now we have a very split picture where some of them shoot up very sharply, buyers forced up as well. Some of them shoot up sharply, buyers are not willing to go up, and then some of them hesitating. So this is definitely still a 50-50, could go either way for me if I look at the Tech 2 market this week. We'll start with the Tech 3 market though, 32.10. There we go. And let's see what these destroyers are doing. Here is the Hecate going back to 50 million, 52 for the sellers, 43 for the buyers, decent supply. The question is, it's showing decent volatility from 40 million up to 60 million. Now that's straight volatility, right? 50% increase from the buy price, not bad. From the bottom buy price here, not bad, but maybe it is starting to slow down here. So let's see what the future brings. Right now it's basically slightly above the average. If it goes down from this point and then settles maybe like above 45 million on the low end for the buyers, which it's 43 million here, still has that potential. But if those buyers are forced up a little bit, at that point we are going to see the end, I think, of this volatile period for the Confessor. The Hecate jumped up, but then is actually flat here, slightly under pressure, 53 million for the sellers, 50 million for the buyers here, but with 260, 50, 47, or 44 here, has the potential here again, I think, to calm down, to basically settle at a trade range above 50 million from this point on. The Jackdaw next, very flat here, and so this is another one of those signs that maybe we are going to lower in volatility with the others. 47.5 for the sellers, 44 million for the buyers, 111 here, 50-50, lots of supply here, causing a stable market. And then we've got the Zweppel as well, pretty stable. I mean, showing some volatility here and there, but basically 45 million is where it is trying to again lower its volatility towards. So here we've got 48.5 for the sellers, 41 for the buyers, decent or even good availability as well for the Zweppel. So when it comes to the cruisers, let's take a look at those. The Legion breaking down the 150 mark and apparently willing to stay there. Let's see what that's all about. 145 for the sellers and 156, 60, 60, 19. That is a decent amount of supply here again, just like with the destroyers. So let's be careful for the general oversupply situation at this point. But the Legion breaking through 150, potentially going lower on big supply here. Next up, we've got the Loki. Loki doing the exact opposite, taking off from 180, going to 200 million. But here, that is what I'm a little bit afraid of. Look at that, 237 coming in right away, 67 coming in right away, 195 for the seller, for the first buyer as well, though. So the Loki is still trying to find its price, but the availability seems to be going up. Next up, we've got the Proteus settling below 150 here, not much to say. 145 for the sellers, again 300, 389. That's obviously a big player setting that price, but the danger is if lots of supply comes in, it's going to continue to put some pressure on this one. And then we've got the Tengu again, very flat again, being set by a major player, 145 million, 390 units of them. Daily volumes, maybe 100 of them, something like that. That means that this is a problem. This means that the Tengu is not going anywhere as long as there's 400 of them available at this price. And that's why 2 weeks in a row the Tengu on the ticker has done 0%. But it's an interesting situation. Look at that. This is another almost 700 Protea here for the Legion. We're talking not that many too much, right? 260 to 70. That's like 3 days supply, a little bit less than that probably, because the Legion is actually, well, nope, yeah, there we go, 3 to 4 days actually. And then we've got the Loki with 230, again another 300 to 400 chips available here. It is starting to increase on the numbers that are available on the market, and some people are dumping massively at like a 145 trade range. And then for the destroyers here, we get the Confessor, well, 150, that's not that many. But then look at the Hecate here, 260, and so like 100 more here. Then we've got the Jackdaw, 111 here, another 100 there, that's dangerous. And we've got the Svepel as well with 100 here. It's a little bit better on the Svepel as well. But yeah, if this keeps going up in numbers across the board, be careful for a general oversupply situation. And at the moment, unfortunately, I think that this increased availability, especially in the Confessor, which was very interesting for a couple of months here, is decreasing volatility in the Tech 3 market. And then for the extra product, Advanced Moon Materials at 47 minutes. Let's see what's been happening here. So we've got materials, then we've got, I would say, I think it's reaction, advanced, yeah, there we go. So let's go over these, let's see what's actually been happening. Here is crystalline carbonite. This is a massive December spike, a little bit late there, but what I would say is that's very possible. I saw a Reddit post that said that, well, there are still massive stocks when late October, early November, we actually have the deployment of the new refineries. So the market can still absorb that shock for a while, but people did not expect it to be that tricky to get everything up and running, and as a result you have this delayed spike here, which is pretty damn massive. Starting price 200, high points 359, not bad, and we are currently, so let's say below 200 normally. We're still selling this at 220, buyers are at 214, so both of them are a decent chunk, around 10% above the normal price, which would put the increased price for Tech 2 ships, if it's 10% across the board though, at like maybe 23, 24 million, as maybe even 22 million as a bottom. So definitely not the current trade range. Let's see what the others are doing. Here is fermionic condensates though. That's still staying at that very high point. That's interesting. 92,500 for the sellers, 90,000 for the buyers as well. That market has found its range here, unfortunately. But also one thing to note though, October, we were already at this price. So there's maybe the speculative jump here from 80 to 100,000, but overall, since the deployment, it hasn't moved that much. So let's see if we can find something else here. Ferrite carbide, obviously here, October, speculative bubble up to 225, actually dropping down to 175, but now worked its way up to 250 and is actually staying there. 250 for the sellers, 245 for the buyers. This is actually really important. The market is willing to buy ferrite carbide at 250. Previous price 175, something like that. That's much bigger than a 10% margin, of course. That would indicate that prices are going to stay higher for Tech 2 ships. Ferrogel though, that one is back to its average price after an October spike. So we went from, let's say, 38,000 up to 60,000. Definitely a good trade right there, but we're back at 36.5 thousand. So it's a mixed picture here as well. I'm a little bit surprised by that. It's a mixed picture. You've got increased volumes that don't affect the price at all, which is quite interesting. So I thought maybe we'd get a uniform a uniform movement in the market. You do have the spikes, obviously here, September spike on speculation, October spike on speculation, and then Fullerite settling at around a little bit less than 1,000 ISK, where before it was maybe 750 to 800. So here again, we do have a decent increase in price for Fullerites, going for 970, buyers at 926. So that margin has closed as well. The market has found its price range at the moment. Hypersynaptic fibers also obviously up in price from before with a nice massive spike here, 10,000 to almost 20,000 is currently 11,000, 10,000 for the buyers here, slightly higher margin, so a little bit more tricky to say what hypersynaptic fibers will be doing. Nano transmitters also settling, of course, from the refinery change right here, and yeah, we're paying a premium. It's not crazy, but if you look at the entire average for everything before the spike here, you would have to put that at less than 4,000 ISK. Currently selling for 4,600, and again for 4,400 for the buyer. So 10% increase does seem to be like the minimum that we should expect though. Non-linear metamaterials here again, so the before one 20k, you have some spikes of course. Then here refinery introduction going up in price and currently selling for 23,000, yeah, 21,500 here again, the buyers 10% up, something like that. Phenolic composites here, pretty nice bubble starting at 1,750 up to 3,000, almost a doubling in price, and then currently selling for 2,160. Buyers are at 2,000, so if we take 1,750 at 10%, we're a bit above that for the buyers again, but that seems to be the range that I'm actually starting to see most of the times. Here again, photonic metamaterials, very, very nice run up in September, then actually through the deployment staying very high at like 25,000 ISK, coming from half that, and then here settling at sellers 16,600, buyers 15,800 though, so 12,500. That's a little bit more. That's probably closer to 20% increase in price on this one. Plasmonic metamaterials next here again, very early speculation in August, another spike here up to 30,000 ISK late October, right on the deployment, but then right away we do have that pressure coming in, and yet we are paying the premium, less than 15,000 ISK before, less than 20,000 ISK now, and that still leaves me an hour, so no problem on that one. Ceramic fibers, quite interesting, not that big of a mover during the deployment of the new refineries, but look at that, 1 year high point on ceramic fibers, 569 for the sellers, 543 ISK for the buyers, and used to be 350, so a very nice premium, definitely a great price for the ceramic fibers at the moment. Terahertz metamaterials here, definitely an increased price, a bit of a premium on this one as well. Well, if you would take 20,000 and then currently buyers are at 20,500, you have to take a little bit less than that on the average here. Another 10% here for sure. Titanium carbide, late spike here in December up to 350, but before all the speculation here, 184, currently 240 on average. Yeah, sellers 245, buyers 245. That's a 0.06 cent margin here between or no, it's 6 cent margin here, so really no margin whatsoever between the sellers and the buyers. Titanium carbide definitely commanding a nice premium as well. And then we've got tungsten carbide staying very high as well, from 150 to 225. Obviously there are different classes that must have something to do with volumes and availability and things like that, but we have to be honest here, the general trend is definitely up. Most of them I would say at least 10%, 10 to 20%, but if we look at the prices here on the ships, then as a response, right, I would say even 25% on average would be a high increase. And then here we go, well, 25 million and currently 30 million. But the lower end was 20 million. If I would have to do the calculation there, I would say that we could look at bottoms at 25 million. I think that that has to be in play considering what the moon materials are doing. So personally, I am expecting another leg down with bottoms closer to 25 million. That's where I would start to pay attention to maybe pick up some of these frigates. But here at this point, some of them, right, like the Claw taking back off here, are saying no, but we may just still need a little bit more time. But you can clearly see here that the trade range for the Claw was 20 to 25 million on increased base material of 10 to 25%. I don't see 30 million to 35 million here to stay. I personally see I think that we'll see more pressure on this. I may be wrong, maybe there are some steps in between there that actually do grant the increased price of 50%, but I think that that's too much. That's my expectation though. We may still need some time for that to play out. And there you go. With that, I'm going to end this EVE talk. Hope it helps. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.